I want to ask you, through a few questions because, as I mentioned earlier, the main questions I'm getting, especially when I go to women's conferences and I speak there, is women are wanting to know how do we know we have the right books of the Bible? So that's kind of the first question. But then, even if we had the right books, or if you could even prove that or know that, there seems to be two questions in my mind when it comes to the New Testament and specifically the Gospels. And that's number one, do we have an accurate copy of what they actually wrote? And then if we do have an accurate copy, how do we know they told the truth? And so I'd love to walk through some of those questions to help our audience just understand a broad overview of why we know that we can trust the gospel. So let's start with that first question. And of course, this is going to extend to more broadly the New Testament, but how do we know we have the right books?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things behind that question that's working away in people's minds is the idea that sometime after Christianity had got going, there were lots and lots of books milling around, and some people sort of chose from between them and decided on these four. And of course, that's what you get in the Da Vinci Code, but it's where you get elsewhere. And that just misunderstands the situation really, really badly. So, with the four Gospels, they are just before all the other gospels. Even a skeptic like Bart Ehrman agrees on that. But also, there's this idea that gradually over time, gospels get more authority, and that's how these guys won out. But that's quite wrong. Look at the text of, say, Matthew's gospel. And the opening verse says that it calls it the book of the genealogy, using the phrase in Greek that is the book of Genesis. So if you've got Jews at the time of Jesus already believe that Genesis is a book from God, and Matthew is saying it's the same sort of book. And then it's got a genealogy, just like you would have in Genesis 5, Genesis 11. It's saying, I'm the same sort of book. John's gospel begins in the beginning, just like Genesis begins. So it's telling you it's the same sort of book. Luke's gospel begins like First Samuel with this barren couple. There's a child and, well, more than one, and there's a poem, and that's just like First Samuel. First Samuel scripture. Luke is saying, "Hey, I'm the same sort of thing," and Mark is telling you it begins, well, Elijah's back. Well, last time we had Elijah, there was scripture. So I think all four of them are claiming to be scripture, and so you have this question of their testimony. You can't say, well, they're sort of half true. They are claiming to be books from God. So either they really are from God, or they are fakes of an immoral kind. So that's where I think this idea that they're somehow somewhere in the middle, and there are lots of these books that are somehow in the middle, doesn't work. Then you can look at it from the other angle. People say, well, they've heard of, say, the Gospel of Thomas. Should the Gospel of Thomas be in the Bible? Well, the thing is, even the Gospel of Thomas says it shouldn't be in the Bible. The opening line of it says, these are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke, and which Didymus Judas Thomas wrote down. So what's it telling you? It's telling you there's a public thing that's been set out elsewhere. And if you want the inside scoop, you have to come to the Gospel of Thomas. So it's not saying you can put the Gospel of Thomas alongside any other Gospels. It's saying it's the replacement for all of those. They're just the public message. This is the inside scoop. So the idea that you could put that in a Bible sitting alongside other things doesn't make any sense. But you can also see that it's a rather devious way of beginning things, because whereas the four Gospels are giving you what Jesus taught publicly, this is claiming, and it's written quite a bit later, of course, it's claiming, well, you mustn't trust any of the thing that you hear from all those witnesses in public. He only really told the real truth to this one guy, Thomas, and that's what I'm letting you know, which is all very convenient. And there's another gospel that's similar, the Gospel of Judas. And again, you can't have the Gospel of Judas and the Gospel of Thomas together. They are mutually exclusive. And that is, Jesus only told the real scoop to Judas Iscariot. So that's where just people have misunderstood what these things are. And popular narratives like you get in the Da Vinci Code are, helping people think that way, that there was this whole raft of books, and somehow some powerful people in the church said, we want those ones because they're going to get us more money or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's also this idea that I hear quite a bit that If you go back to the earliest Christianity, it was just incredibly diverse theologically. Like they had all these different views of what the gospel was and who Jesus was. And it was really just the theological winners of the battles that got to write the New Testament and specifically the gospels about Jesus' life. How could we respond to a claim like that?
Well, I think in all four gospels, we've got this very high view of Jesus, where say in Matthew's gospel, he is treated as the Son of Man who sits on his throne and judges the nations. Well, that's something that God does. Or in Mark's gospel, he forgives sins. This is something that God does. So you go through each of the gospels and they have this very, very high view of Jesus. It's not something that develops over time. So I think there is this unity around Jesus being absolutely a remarkable, exceptional person, but not just that. Actually, far more than that, and that's something that's there all along. Now, later on, I think you get lots of debates where you've got groups, we call them now heretical groups, that say things like, well, maybe he wasn't fully human, or maybe he wasn't fully God. But I think those things are things that come along later. You in the Gospels themselves, you've got Jesus presented as doing things that only God does.
Yeah. And I think it was Gary Habermas who was maybe quoting somebody else, but he was saying the earliest Christology is the highest Christology. It's just, it's, if you look at the Gospels in the earliest, even some of those proto creeds, you have Jesus being presented as, Jesus is Lord. You have all of these, this high Christology from a very early point.
Absolutely.